What's up everybody? Welcome to Balkan Moto. Today we continue with disassembling the engine. Okay, so picking up where we left off last time, after we took off the cylinder head, the front cylinder head, today we're going to work on removing the rear, and depending on how fast that goes and where we get to, we're going to start to look at how do we disassemble the rest of the engine and how do we take essentially the top part off and the bottom part off. But before we get to that, let's get this guy off. In terms of what happened with the rest of the parts, I cleaned up some of them and moved them out of here. And left the kind of like the external components that will eventually make their way back onto the engine. So my plan really is to kind of empty out the internals to make it as light as possible, then to clean up all the external stuff and reassemble it so that it can be displayed on the wall. But for the time being, let's keep disassembling. So let's flip this guy around so it's easier to work on, and let's take off the top stuff. All right, the backside lid is off. The main difference between the two is that the backside one is actually in two pieces. So if you do want to do the valve adjustment on the bike, you can't take off the whole thing if it's in one piece. So in two pieces, you can actually slide it out from under the frame. As for the rest of the stuff, it's identical. We have the chain guard, the oil lines, and the same set of bolts. As for things on here, the chain is actually still tensioned on this side. So same thing here, I probably have to undo the bolts down there and down here, and maybe take out this pin so that the tensioner can essentially loosen up and I can pull out the camshafts. Before we do that, let's take off these, and these to free up the camshaft completely and see if we can inspect anything from that point on. So far, the one thing that I have noticed is that at the top here, there's this like black sludge everywhere. I'm not sure what it's from, but I noticed it even on the oil line. They had like, I don't know if you can see how it's like dirty. I wiped it already, but it had more of this like black stuff on there. So we'll see what that could be. But yeah, let's keep disassembling, see how far we get. All right, the camshaft and chain tensioner are out. A few things we've noticed. As I mentioned before, the exhaust pipes, especially on this cylinder here, had like a lot of, oh actually sorry, no, it's this one. So this one had a lot of black deposit on it, which looked like oil. And in terms of things in here, it doesn't seem like there's much damage. Obviously there's like a little bit of wear and tear on the what are these called, little rocker arms or whatever, from the camshaft rolling over them. And you can see the intake ones are a lot smoother. So you can see that they're a lot smoother. But then when I inspected the exhaust camshaft, so the really interesting thing is that it has like these discolorations in the metal. Like you can see here, there's like all these like black dots, and like that's not dirt, that's like literally just the metal has changed color, which I'm assuming is that a whole manufacturing process defects, as well as like right on the tip you can see there's a little groove here, and that's probably like eating away at that top. And then on this one, let's see, this one again, not the most greatest manufacturing, but you know, for 80s, that's fine. Like the back side of it is darker, which is a little odd. Oh, sorry, no, this is the intake. This is the exhaust one. So on the intake one, we have discoloration spots. On the exhaust one, you can see one side is really dark on the back side of the big lobe, but on the other side it's okay, and then again it gets really dark. So it's weird that they're dark on the back side but really rubbed off in the front. It's almost as if though the heat and oil are discoloring the metal on the back end. Comparing them to the front two cylinders, it seems like the front two cylinders have a little bit more imperfections, like you can see here. This one's a little more scored, and that's the intake. But either way, nothing, you know, horribly damaged. The chain tensioner, I mean, you can see it's got this like weird deposit of like grease and oil on it, which, whatever. Let's take that out. I think we're pretty much done here. You can kind of already see through the engine. So let's take off the 4 bolts holding everything together and take the head off. The back two cylinder head is off, and here it is right here. Everything as expected, and here are how the two back pistons look like. I don't know if I can get more light in there, but there we go. Maybe you can see that better. They have the same sort of engine, like carbon buildup, but both of them seem to have oil in them as well. So I think that's what was happening with this one. This one must be, the rings might be gone, and it might be leaking oil into it, hence why it was pushing it out of the exhaust. So if we look at the exhaust port here, you can see how oily it is, versus this one. It's pretty dry, but still quite a bit of stuff that's not supposed to be there is there. So it's likely that this one's gone. Okay, now that this is done, we got to figure out how to separate the top part of the block from the bottom part. And I'm pretty sure it's just held in place by a number of bolts. These ones that look like they're not there are technically from the bottom up. So I'll have to find, there's 2 here. I'm not sure if this one holds anything. It probably does, so I'll probably take that off. This one too. There is these whole bunch on the bottom here. There's some on this side, some on that side. Probably, well, there's none on this side, so unless, no, there's nothing on the bottom. Okay, so let's take all of those off and see if we can pull off the top. So something very interesting about the bolts at the bottom that I'm assuming are the main bolts that hold the entire block together. They're actually really cool. They have the thread at the top, but also they have this other thread down the middle that has this like sealant on it. And the really interesting thing is that when you do loosen them, as you will see in a second, they actually make a little bit of a sound that sounds like air pressure being released. So just listen to that. I guess this one didn't do it, or it wasn't very audible. Let's try the other one. Did you hear that? It almost sounds like a Coke bottle opening, just like tss. Alright, the back side, left side, and front side bolts are out. So these ones were from the back, and these ones are from the side, and these are from the front. And important things to mention, On the front, there's two very useful bolts here and here that are essentially just directly piped to the coolant space behind the cylinders. When you open them up, just put a cup there and we'll drain whatever coolant fluid is still in these cavities, because trying to suck it out from here is pretty much impossible. And leaving it in there, once you open up the entire case, it will just leak all over the place. So as much as you can get out, the better. Now we're moving on to the right side, which I didn't think it had any bolts, but it does. And they're all under here. So we have two of these big guys here, and I gotta check under, but I'm sure there's more in there. Yeah, and then once those are out, technically the exterior bolts are gone. Then I would presume that just this bracket is what keeps the entire thing together. So let's remove those and see if we can get this thing to budge open. Okay, all the bolts that are on this side are also off. There was 4 really big ones under here. There was the bracket that was holding this, essentially the top and the bottom part. I think this is called a bearing holder bracket. There was a bolt that actually went through here, essentially connecting the two parts as well. I also took off the gear gizmos up here, essentially the shifter mechanism, which is all this little stuff here. And I referred to the manual, and it turns out that in order to separate the two halves, there are at least 6 or 8 more bolts that are on the inside, so in this cavity here. So in order to do that, I have to remove the oil pan and flip the engine upside down. Now you can see that there's well, I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but there is oil in the pan. So if I flipped it over, all of that's gonna go everywhere. So what I'm planning on doing is to loosen up the oil pan, so take off all these bolts, and essentially take the engine off of it and then flip that over, so that the oil that's in the pan right now stays in the pan, and any residual oil that is kind of in the engine itself, yes, that will spill, but that's not the end of the world. We'll put some more towels here and do that stuff. So let's loosen up the bolts on the oil pan and lift this thing off. I think at this point it's significantly lighter than before, so shouldn't be too much of a problem to lift. The engine is upside down. Now, because it's not really meant to sit upside down, or sit period, I had to take out some extra pieces of wood to support it. Otherwise it'd be completely unstable to work on. So here's the oil pan with all the oil that could have spilled out. This internal oil filter is actually interesting, because you can see how much sludge and whatever the hell that is, it's collected. And the oil itself is murky. And then we have everything else. I think just to make things easier to work on, I probably will have to take off the oil pump just to get it out of the way. And then all those big bolts down there and there are the ones that we're gonna need to take out. And should be good to start disassembling from then on. I think I see what 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, so 6 bolts. Maybe this one here 7. Yeah, not too many. So let's get this guy out and then undo those 7 bolts, and we're out of space again. So for the rest of the components, I'm gonna need to make space somewhere, unless I start bringing more stuff downstairs, because either way I'm gonna need to clean, polish and paint. But either way, let's take this out and see if we can at least loosen things up to take a look inside. Okay, the oil pump is out, and the rest of the crankcase bolts are out. So on the bottom side we had 6 big ones and 1 small one to match the plethora of other ones on the outside. And I banged around a little bit, and the bottom part is now able to separate, as you can see, from the top part. When you pull it up, it actually comes up with more or less the entirety of the gearbox, it seems, because all of these gears come up. On the other side, yeah, so I think the entire bottom side is the gearbox. So let's lift this off. It's still pretty heavy. I'm just going to lift it off and put it down there, just so we can take a look at what's going on inside. All right, the bottom case is out. As you pull it up, the gears in this section here actually all end up being loose, and you can actually pull the entire shaft out. So it took a little bit of fiddling around to like not drop everything on the floor with that. And this is what the bottom of the engine looks like. The main crankshaft's right here. It's actually loose. You could pull it up entirely with the connection rods and the pistons themselves, which we probably will do at some point. We have the other part of the gearbox right here, and all the gear locking bits. So as this shifts around, it like locks the different gears. So if you're ever curious how gear boxes work, well, that's how they work. There you go. That's why sometimes you can't get it into gear, because things aren't in the right place. So that's pretty cool. So we're gonna take all of this out, clean it up, and see what we can do with it, and then put the entire engine back together. Well, not the entire engine, the exterior of the engine, so it would look like it's all together. All right, guys, that was it for this episode. We managed to fully break down the main components of the engine. In next episode, we're gonna start taking some of these internals apart and seeing how they work, and hopefully making some plans for them. Make sure to subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications when new videos become available. Check me out on Instagram at Balkan Moto 2018, and make sure to check out balkanmoto.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.